No. Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Sanders. I'm head of the CICMQ program for the Chartered Institute of Credit Management. And welcome to the 101st CICMQ Zoom call since lockdown. We have today a CICMQ organisation called Imperial College London. And Imperial College London, the head of income is a chap called Gavin Jones, and he is on the call now. Morning, Gavin. Thanks very much for joining us, and thanks very much for putting together what is a very innovative and interesting presentation format. He showed us last week. I think he was showing off last week, to be honest, but he showed us last week, and it was really good. And Pam and I thought, wow, this is terrific. So, and we thought we'd make sure that he's going to be using that today. So I'll be sharing my screen, but the format of this presentation means that he will be actually controlling my screen from his location. Quite how that works, I don't know. It's magic, I guess. So what I'm going to do now is share my screen, and hopefully we can see that. It's in that one there. There we go. Okay, so I would very much like to thank and welcome Gavin Jones. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, Gavin. And I'd like to over to you. Go ahead.
Great. Good morning, everyone, and a big thank you to Chris and the team for having me. I'll start with a warning. I think someone must have known that I was doing this presentation. So for the last week, I've been experiencing problems with my internet. If I do,
now he tells us, ladies.
Now I tell you, yeah, absolutely. But if I do cut out, just do your best to imagine what I was going to say and how fantastic it would have been. I'm going to talk about what best practice means for an organization like Imperial College. I'll start with a quick intro to me, then Imperial and my team, and then talk about best practice ranging from the strategic to operational and personal levels. So, as well as a quick intro, I'll also talk about 2020 and how it has changed things for us. So my background, as you will see here, is probably in a CICM manual somewhere. I've worked as an investigator, a debt collector, in collections, risk, and in both the private and public sectors. The only thing I haven't done is work as a bailiff, but given how short I am, that's probably a good thing. This is our fantastic team at Imperial College, and I'll talk a bit more about how we are set up later in this presentation. You can also see our building here, and if you look closely, you can see all the lovely greenery in London on site. Of course, we're located on the other side, facing another building, so we don't get to see that. But it's actually not such a bad thing as we look out onto the robotics lab, which has been known to have some pretty cool things going on as well. So 2020, the year that changed it all. Now, like most people on this call, we've had to adapt to working from home, and that has meant new equipment, laptops for everyone, a quick new telephony system, and secure connections back into the network. It has also meant new work colleagues for many of us. And for me, that included Superman and a cat who loves laying on keyboards. And you can see here some of the home setups my team have, which I have to say are looking a lot tidier than mine right now. I'll talk a little bit about Imperial here. So what do we do? Well, our mission statement focuses on achieving enduring excellence in research and education in our four main areas: science, engineering, medicine, and business, for the benefit of society. And this last part is one of the reasons I'm quite proud of working here. We have nearly 2,000 key workers keeping essential services running and supporting COVID-19 research. We have over 1,000 members of staff volunteering to support the NHS, and we have converted labs for NHS COVID testing. You've probably seen us in the news, and we're helping with policy, vaccines, testing, online learning, and much, much more. Which leads me to my next slide, which is about the rankings. So one of the factors that is particularly important to universities is their ranking in the higher education polls. And as you can see here, there are quite a few, and they rank universities globally and locally. And we tend to be grouped in the high levels in most of these rankings. I won't dwell too long on this, but it was really to showcase it as a reflection of the hard work we put in at every level within the organization. A quick look at some of our financials, and here are the numbers from the last financial year. You can see top left, they show a total income of just over 1 billion. And from the bottom two figures, you can see this is primarily composed of research and tuition-related income, but the rest is a whole range of different sources. We do weddings, we run a nursery, we function as a hotel over the summer, and that's just to name but a few. Who we are at Imperial is interesting, and I've put this here to give you a flavor of what working here is like. We have over 18,000 students split between undergraduates, postgraduates, and research postgrads. We are an international community from over 132 different countries. And it's not unusual to hear quite a few different languages as you walk around campus. And this is supported by 3,700 academic staff and over 4,000 support staff, of which the income team are part of. So the figure that isn't shown here is the thousands of customers we deal with as well, which can range from local charities to global pharmaceutical companies from all around the world. So who is the income team? There are actually three different teams sitting within income. In total, we're about 25 strong, but this can increase during the busy periods as we bring in temps to support the service. The teams are student fees, a team of 6 who manage most things to do with tuition-related fees. This is an incredibly complex setup, and the team deal with a high volume of queries from staff, students, parents, and sponsors. Our credit control team of 7 manage the debt recovery activities for the college. And to give a real life example, they could be speaking to a student's concerned parents on one call, to the finance director of a listed Japanese tech firm in the next. Last but certainly not least, we have the accounts receivable team. And I'm going to offer my apologies to them in advance if I've missed things they do here. They have a lot of duties, but remembering them all and fitting them into the space proved tricky. Some key ones that they do are billing, cash allocation, customer setups, and risk analysis. It's an incredibly diverse team who do need to jump between different duties throughout the day. And of course, we are proud of our accreditation and our re-accreditation during the pandemic, and also some of our awards, which include being a finalist in this year's British Credit Awards. And now we'll go on to the various aspects of best practice. And here I'll talk about the vision of best practice first, so how we aim to get there at a strategic level. And to illustrate this, I'll show you a framework that we use, and also a vision of automation that underpins a lot of our projects. So what is the framework? In its simplest form, it is a description of 6 key areas that we think we should be aiming for. Now, the key thing about this framework is that it is changeable. As new technologies or new social trends become the norm, this framework will need to be adapted, and the very definition of best practice could move. And you'll see later why this is important when we come to benchmarking. So first on the list, we have customer data management. One of the key foundations of best practice is customer data. I'm sure a lot of people on this call will agree. Whether this is contact information, making sure there are no duplicates, trying to align naming conventions, even just like LTD versus limited. And it also talks about regular reviews and controls around key changes, or in other words, knowing and monitoring who is changing customer data. Then on to invoice generation, and here the focus is on automation. So trying to move away from any duplication of effort and allowing invoices to be raised automatically from source systems with the proper checks in place. And I'll talk a bit more about this later in the presentation. Collecting debts. A few key words in here. We have qualified credit controllers using strategies based on customer type to collect debt and resolve disputes. And again, automation where possible, but I'll add the caveat here that this is for the tasks that should be automated. I'm still of the school of thought that the most effective method of credit control is building one-to-one relationships with our customers. And the last bit is critical in here, reviewing debt reports regularly. And I've got a section on that coming up in the operational best practice area. Processing receipts. Again, that line about automation. And this is really the focus on automation for the easy stuff. The stuff that the moment it comes in, we know where it should go. We don't want people spending time focusing on that when they should be focusing on the stuff that's hard to match or identify. And a quick word of caution about receipt automation. We're building this up incrementally because automation has to be smart. If you hurry this, it's very easy for a system to recognize a payment and put it somewhere you don't want it to go. And that means more work for you and disruption for your customers in the long run. Assessing credit risk. Again, we have a focus here on qualified staff and a move towards a system-driven assessment with automatic notifications. But this is a balancing act, and we don't want to do away with the keen eye of one of our agents being able to spot something wrong. So it boils down to reporting as well. And for us, this can be sometimes tricky because we have work in progress, which can be significant, and it's not always held in the same system. So we need to ensure our reviews are robust enough to take all that into account. And finally, we have customer focus or customer service. This is really about making things as easy for our customers as possible and ensuring that we are delivering excellence wherever we can. Now, this could be minor things like ensuring a student does not have to remember 2 passwords, depending on which Imperial system they're logging into, or ensuring our web pages provide as much information as possible whilst being user-friendly. And sometimes it's a tough juggling act. So that's the framework as a whole. So now I'll talk about what we did with this framework. We put it into a spider chart where we said, okay, if we do all of this perfectly, that means a score of 10 out of 10 for each. And you can see on this diagram that middle is 0 and along the outer edge is 10. Then we used this diagram to benchmark where we thought we were and used it to drive which projects we wanted to work on. So here's an example of how we scored ourselves based on what we currently do. And then for each point we were removed from a score of 10, we assigned 1 or more projects which would help us get there. An example is the implementation of a 24-hour automated telephone payment line where a customer can ring and input their card details to make a payment. Now, that is by no means a new technology, and a lot of companies offer it already. But for us, it was one way we were not meeting the score out of 10 for customer focus. So we implemented it and brought us slightly closer to that 10. The journey to automation. So I mentioned this was something underpinning all our projects. So what is it really? This is, again, a vision. And at its heart, it helps us select projects and make sure that the changes that we are making within the college are all pointing us in the same direction. So we started by asking ourselves a question, and that was, can we achieve automation for one full customer journey, which means the end-to-end invoice to cash process, along with all its nuances and possible queries? Well, that actually proved a bit tricky. So the thing to do in that kind of situation is simply to change the question. And we added the word simple into there, which we think we may be able to answer. So here are some of the key steps we identified in the simple customer journey, from the point an invoice is raised to the point a payment is applied. So some of the things we can do, we can automate the source systems to be able to deliver an invoice to the finance system automatically. Once the invoice is raised, we need to get it to the customer. And whether that's via a push system, such as electronic distribution, for example, an invoice in an email or directly into their system, or a pull system like Amazon have, where you have a document waiting in a portal. Similarly, for the time documents that we issue, but the caveat being that we need to have enough control to stop them if we need to. We also need to make sure that the simple queries, the ones our customers are likely to ask, are accessible and in our comms, which we revise constantly. And an example of that is how the payment is made. This is constantly communicated, and I've put in here all caps, here the fact that we should do everything we can to ensure the right reference is quoted when a payment is made. And this ties into the payment applications. We use an automated system for this, which recognizes a reference and value and will automatically apply and allocate that payment for us. Now, this diagram isn't anything new, but theoretically, being able to have the system take care of things from start to end in this customer journey with no manual intervention is quite complex and an aspiration for an organization like ours, which has different systems and business units and invoice types. So on to operational best practice. And this is the operational level of working. And really, it's just a series of tips that have worked for us and hopefully will also be of use to you. I've included at the end some time for personal development, what it means to us, and again, some tips that we picked up along the way. So when we come to operational best practice, one of the areas that comes to light is team effectiveness. What are some of the things that we can do better as a team to ensure we work together to drive a great service? Examples include feedback surveys, which is where we are looking to gather information and translate that into action, such as recognizing success or delving deeper into what we should do. Standard procedures, well, that's just common sense, and where we should document as much as we can. A visual workplace. This means we try and display as much information as we can in the space we have. And you can walk by our team and you can see everything from top debtors to system issues to our grinning faces from the last Christmas party. Huddles. I put huddles here, but what I really mean is constant contact with the team, whether that's catch-ups, team meetings, or Friday morning virtual coffee, you name it. And finally, the skill matrix, where we try and capture our team's strengths and what we need to focus on. This is updated annually, although I'll admit that last year this was deprioritized, but we'll definitely be reviewing this soon as it's a great tool to have. So on to reporting. So for us, reporting is key, and I'm sure it is for all of you, but I can honestly say for years that I was doing it wrong. I was wrong because I was trying to share the data that was interesting or important to me and my goals. Stakeholders don't care about that. They want to see what they need to know. And if they see that, then maybe they can see other things you have to show them. Now, you may notice a mosquito off to the side of the screen. That's not a bug. Well, it is a bug, but not a computer bug. And that's there to hammer the point home and relates to a TED talk given by Bill Gates. Now, you may be aware of it. He was talking about malaria and how, despite the number of deaths it caused, more money was spent on hair loss drugs because it affected rich people. So to make people pay attention, he released mosquitoes live on stage into the crowd. Now, I've never walked into a meeting yet and released a mosquito, but I do try and always tailor the reports to the audience, highlight what's important to them, and find out what will make them sit up and pay attention. And I'll give you some examples of the reports we run. So we have a series of weekly reports, and one example here is our debt report, which covers all our aging buckets as compared to the same time in the prior 2 years. And we break this down further, as shown here, by total debts, debits, cash, credits, type of debt. And we also have an overview of the number and value of debt that is disputed. And you'll notice an angry little face there against that's a bugbear of mine, which is the other dispute code. Now, I was talking with Chris, and then he's of removing that altogether. We're not quite there yet, but I hope to be one day soon. And we also have our monthly reporting, which is a lot more in depth, a 14-page report plus a different KPI page. And I'm happy to give you some examples of what's included in that report. So we have, for example, a top 10 debt page. And that's a top 10 analysis. Sorry, can everyone see that?
Yeah, we can see the top 10 debt. Yeah.
A top 10 analysis for overall debt, OQ debt, age debt, internal customers, on account, and unrecognized cash. And you may see in the middle there some blank spaces. In the report that actually goes up, that has a description of what's happening with that account at any given time. We have a snapshot of billing by financial year, an overview of debt by type and then by buckets, a further breakdown of debt by our different business units. And we do have different business units or faculties who all operate very differently, but it's good to see them next to each other. And we have payments processed by day and time to allocate. That's just some of our reporting. There's a lot more in addition to that we distribute to various specific groups, and really the more the merrier. What we do try and do is if someone needs a report or asks us for one, we meet with them to talk it through and get to the heart of what they really need. But that's it on reporting. I'll move on to personal development. So personal development, what is it? Now that's a tough question and will mean different things to different organizations. For us, it means education or training to better yourself, whether that be in credit management, leadership, or other areas. It means widening our horizons. And at previous income meetings, we have had people from our ICT or our EDI, that's our Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion team, come and talk about what they do within the organization. It means personal productivity. And that's something we're quite passionate about. And presentations have led to one-to-one discussions about how people can improve themselves or things they are struggling with. And I'll give some examples here with my key tools, eating frogs, and time blocking. So one example is the 4 key tools that I use every day and how they tie together. We have a to-do list, which is really key for capturing anything that needs to be done, especially when you have a terrible memory like mine. Oh. And I jump from meeting to meeting. The calendar, an email client, but really it is the ultimate planner for you to schedule your tasks. The notepad, sorry, and here I give OneNote as an example, but there are a lot of great tools out there. You can use it to write everything down, capture whiteboards or process maps. And finally, the storage folder. This is where the work really happens. The Excel, the Word documents, the PowerPoint presentations. And the key thing tying these together is an idea. And I'll give a quote by David Allen. He wrote a book or has a series of talks about getting things done. Your mind is for having ideas, not for holding them. So in other words, get everything you can out of your head and into your system. And here's an example of how I tie that system together. 5 folders that are exactly the same across all the tools I have. And here's a screenshot of my Outlook, OneNote, and OneDrive folders, which is broken.
He's just frozen. Oh, has he gone? I think he's gone. That's the first time in 101 meetings that the presenter has actually disappeared. So let's just. Oh, hang on a moment. Is this?
I told you I was having problems with my internet.
Yeah, there you go. Sorry. Glad. Welcome back, Gavin.
Thank you. I knew this would happen. So, how far did we get?
You got to having OneNote, all the 5 folders being exactly the same in Outlook.
Excellent.
Notes and whatever, yeah, and it's actually on the screen there. You can see that now, yeah.
Brilliant. Hopefully it carries on then. So there's an inbox where things land, projects for things that have a deliverable or end date, areas for ongoing activities I deal with. For example, credit control, resources. This could be any white papers or reference material.
You're still struggling a little bit.
Management. Now, this is.
Okay, you might want to close down a couple of other windows that you've got open, Gavin. Sometimes that helps a little bit. Is it just me, or is other people? Thumbs up if you've got problems hearing Gavin. Yeah, okay, there's a few people, right? Okay, so it's not just me. Hi, Gavin, are you still there? You're moving.
Then the archive, where things go once I'm done.
Okay.
Eat that frog. Don't worry, we're near the end, so hopefully it'll stay till then. This is an interesting idea, but one that I can say has changed how I work. It's based on a book by a man called Brian Tracy, who references a quote by Mark Twain about eating a frog. Basically, it's getting to the hardest or most distasteful task of the day out of the way. That one thing you're most likely to procrastinate on. Now, there's a lot in that book, but this one stuck with me because it's also about prioritization, about identifying the most important task and then when to do it. Which leads me nicely to the last point, which is time blocking. So this is nothing new, and I'm sure most of you do this in some way already, but it's been part of my life for a few years now, and it's critical. Essentially, it's splitting up your day into blocks for specific tasks, but being smart about that assignment of tasks. So for example, splitting out shallow or repetitive tasks for when your low energy points are, or deep work for those times you can really focus. And of course, making sure that you schedule in your breaks, your lunch, or your trips down the pub, whenever that may be. So that's it from me, everyone. And of course, no presentation is complete if it doesn't have a Dilbert comic. So happy to take any questions, and apologies for the network connection issues.
Okay. Okay. Well, thanks. Thanks very much, Gavin. I think everybody will agree that watching that presentation, when you compare it to your standard PowerPoint stuff, is much more engaging and interesting to watch. It's something that I found when we did it last week, as a sort of just to sort of test it and make sure that it all worked. I thought that was just fantastic. I've got some questions. There's been a few comments about your simple approach. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to close. I'm going to stop sharing just now. So I've got everybody back in the room. There we go. I've got a question about your simple, but what you're trying to do there is something that I tried to do back in my cable and wireless days, was to create this factory process. Yeah, where you put stuff in one end and it comes out the other, and there's very little or limited contact in between. And if you get that right, then you're dealing with exceptions, which is what you're trying to do, rather than trying to deal with everybody. But what you're also doing is being able, you can forecast what you're plugging in at the front. X number of new customers equals that number of reminder letters. Over time, you can actually start to measure it like that. And then that provides you with resource information for your teams, for example. So if something goes wrong, you know that if the number of errors starts to go up, as part of the factory process where you're going to have your pain points. Is that something that you're looking at in terms of resource sort of forecasting as well as part of your simple approach, or is that still something for the future?
Well, when it comes to resource, a good example here is that end-to-end process. So if we take right at the end, the allocation of cash. So when that wasn't automated, or part of it wasn't automated, we found we had to spend time on the really simple stuff, like okay, this payment has that reference and it's for that value. Let's spend some time making sure it goes on that customer account and gets applied. Right. And we had those other payments, could be much larger in value, where the reference was something like, I can't remember, my fees, for example. That's the reference, that's it. And we have, as you saw, 18,000 students and more. We never, in some cases, never actually got round to doing that or investigating that properly. And that just went on an unallocated cash account because we were focusing on this easy stuff. So automating at least that percentage, it's not going to be 100%, definitely never. But automating a certain percentage means that the resources are actually, as you say, focused on the stuff we should be focusing on.
Yeah, I've got a question here. How has lockdown affected your students and collections as a result?
Well,
you've done some interesting stuff at the uni, haven't you? Talk about that the lab box thing.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of activity going on at the university to help our students to make their experience as good as possible. I'm probably not best placed to talk about all of the great things we've done, but one example, when I heard about it, I just thought, how cool is that? Because we have a lot of science-based programs. I mean, that's a huge part of us. So they actually designed a lab in a box. So if students couldn't come to campus, we could send them something at least to be able to do some of the work they needed to do. But no, I mean, the experience.
That would probably account for all of the explosions and weird acids and strange drugs that have been created around the UK as a result. But it's quite an interesting concept, isn't it? It's quite so you'd put stuff in a box and people would be able to do these experiments at home.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Because I mean, we've got a number of, I've been speaking to a uni relatively recently about this, and one of the things that came up in a conversation that we had last week was around the students are questioning the fees that they have to pay, given that they've had a different experience than all of their previous counterparts in the university experience. You know, we've been working from home, and so what's the difference there? I mean, you've got home students, a college student, etc. How does that work?
So that's a tough one, to be honest, but certainly I know the experience we've provided has been as good as we possibly could given the circumstances. I mean, it's been tough, I'm not going to lie, and we've had to adapt in quite a few ways with the same overhead costs, obviously, that we've always had, plus some more. So turning some courses to have a virtual element, well, the buildings and all the labs haven't suddenly just gone away. They're still there. We've still got that cost. So it certainly hasn't been, I would say, cheaper for us to run, but the focus hasn't been really about the cost. It's delivering that education, that research and all that in the way that the students still get the best outcome. In regards to collections, I know there was a question there. So we really have, and I'm sure many organizations have done this, taken an approach which is collaborative with the students. So for the whole of the year, we talk to them. What are they experiencing? We added an extra member just to be able to help with this. And it's been tough on students. It really has. I mean, even
do you think you're going to get requests for refunds and stuff like that? Are you getting requests for refunds for the things like accommodation and stuff like that? Are you getting that kind of thing coming through now? Because I know the student unions are kind of interested in this kind of stuff, aren't they?
Yeah, in some cases, absolutely. There have been requests, but surprisingly, one of our polls actually, well, we ran for students, showed an increase in satisfaction with the lecturers in the last year, which we were, I won't say amazed, but it was obviously a very good thing to see. Right. And again, it's about working with the students, understanding each case when they do raise it, but that's really a policy decision at the highest levels of college about what happens with the fees.
Yeah, okay. I've got a question here. Did you get any buy-in from the faculty heads when highlighting direct levels of debts, or were you met with initial reluctance due to the nature of such conversations on the basis that academics prioritize headcount over income? I mean, that's the academic world has a different view from commercial world, as we know. I mean, how long have you been at Imperial now?
So at Imperial, about 4 years, but in higher education.
So when you first started, what was it like then compared to what it is now in terms of the relationship that credit has with your stakeholders in the faculties?
Well, I can honestly say for the most part, certainly since I've been in there, we've had a good relationship. We went out, we met with them. That was my, I think, first 2 weeks was just meeting with the countless stakeholders that we do have. In terms of reporting and highlighting it, I have to say I've never had someone push back. The one key thing is they want to know what's happening in their area. And my background before higher education was private sector, and I worked in a large pharmaceutical company, for example, which had business units, and it was exactly the same, whether it's a faculty or business unit. And they were saying, well, our sales are so great, should we highlight the debt? Well, yes, actually, because it's an important part of what you do. Yeah. So it's making sure the stakeholders understand. But I think you saw one of the slides was also the billing. So that's what they want to see. So highlight that for them, but say, oh, by the way, here's something else that's important to us, which you probably should know about. So no pushback in that regard.
One of the things that we always try and push when we're doing CICMQ and other client assignments, etc., are league tables. And we've got a very good proponent of league tables on the call, Tarmac, Lisa and Karen. They drove during 2020 league tables into their business. Is that something that you guys do in Imperial?
Not a league table as such. It's showing the data, and to be fair, none of the faculties are really comparable. They all operate in different ways. They have different things going on, different research types, different collaborations. Some may be dealing more with NHS and charities, others more with corporate partners. Some just mainly have students. So they're all quite different. A league table, it wouldn't actually be relevant, but certainly it doesn't hurt to highlight them all next to each other so we can see where
you put them in a chart, don't you? And they're all, as you say, they're all next to each other. So you can make that comparison for yourself if you choose to do that. The shift to, here we are, another question here. The shift to online purchases with click and collect, do you envisage the same shift to open university type of learning as a more affordable price point? Good question.
It's a good question. Again, that's a policy for the university, but from my point of view, no, I certainly don't see us ever becoming a remote university.
You have a significant amount of international students, don't you?
And part of the experience is them coming here to learn, meeting with the top experts in their field. And sometimes we fly those experts in as well, so it's kind of a nice meeting place.
Yeah. It's a nice environment. Having been there a couple of times, it is a nice environment as well. Okay, and has anybody got here we are, home working. Here we are. This is the home working thing. For those of you who didn't read BBC this morning, on BBC news page, there is a thing about 1 million workers are not going to go back to the office or something like that, and it was a survey of 50+ organizations. And it's interesting, I think we've said this before, that some of the organizations like some of the big 4 consulting firms, I think PricewaterhouseCoopers is the first company to actually come out and say work from home. But what you've got, we've got this question here: home working versus office post lockdown. Do you go Goldman Sachs or HSBC? Good question, Glenn. Goldman Sachs, for those of you that don't know, basically said you're going to go back to the office whether you like it or not. And HSBC and others are turning around and saying, well, we're going to close this, we're going to shut that, but we're going to be working from home and be a lot more flexible. So which way is it going to go for you guys at the university?
So this kind of ties into the previous question. We're always going to have students and sometimes even customers or researchers on site, on campus. So if we want to be able to offer the best service, which includes face-to-face, online, by phone, we need a presence on site. I definitely don't think we're ever going to be 100% everyone in the office at the same time. And I don't think we're going to be 100% everyone from home. But it's going to be that happy medium. I certainly see a hybrid future for my team in the future.
Yeah, I think you're probably, based on what we've seen, the conversations that we've had, I think that's what I think 80% of people want. And it's just a question of when the companies decide to make some of these decisions. We've still got quite a number of companies that are still making decisions around that. Yeah. But yeah, that's interesting. So has anybody got any other, here we are, David Robbins, thanks for the question, David. Keep reporting. Simple charts and graphs carry a greater visual impact as opposed to pages of numbers. Absolutely, which I think is very, very true of this presentation, rather than slide after slide. Sort of click, 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 click. The way that this particular format works was terrific. So thanks very much for showing us that, Gavin. Has anybody got, while we're on here, before I stop the recording, has anybody got a question that they want to ask before I stop the recording? Let's click. I've got 2 pages of delegates here. Let's just have a quick look at the second page. Okay. Nobody. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the recording now. Many thanks, Gavin, for an innovative way of presenting your slides. Brilliant. I really did enjoy that. And I hope everybody else did as well. I'm going to have a play with this in the coming days to see what we can do with this, because it is clearly something good. It's one of those things that, whatever we can do to get people more engaged in presentations, we need to do now. Given that otherwise we're just going to be sitting there on Zoom all the time, just looking at PowerPoint slides, flicking through. This kind of thing is something that we all need to start thinking about. And if we can get the credit teams, all the credit teams on this call, to start using this type of tool with their presentations to their stakeholders, I think we can pretty much guarantee that we're going to be seen as being innovative and interesting and much more engaging than say, for example, customer services or perhaps the accounts department. So thanks very much indeed for that, Gavin. I'm going to stop recording now, and thanks everybody for joining the call today.